ABBA and the Beatles are without a doubt two of the biggest musical groups the world has ever seen. Surprisingly enough, it turns out ABBA has looked up to the Beatles as a place of inspiration since as long as they can remember. It's like a crossover no one expected to see. Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at what ABBA learned from the Beatles. Number 5. The Beatles being inspirational for ABBA. ABBA has recently admitted that the Beatles are undoubtedly one of their biggest, if not the biggest source of inspiration for them ever since the beginning of their career. In an interview with Record Collector, one member of ABBA, Benny Andersson, revealed that he and his group learned a key lesson from the iconic legendary music group. According to him, ABBA was inspired particularly by the diverse musical taste of the Beatles, which gave them the idea to diversify the music they produced themselves. "That's something we learned from the Beatles," said Andersson. "They were always with their style in a way, much more than we were. But what they did was, you heard a song with them, then the next single was nothing close to the previous one, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth. So you have Fernando, you want a song like Dancing Queen, or My Mama Said, or whatever on that album to give it some listening value," he added. Number 4. The reason ABBA had multiple lead singers. Andersson wasn't done singing the Beatles' praises just yet. He went on to explain how such an ethos, if you could say, can be applied to ABBA's artistic career in terms of how the group made efficient use of more than a couple lead singers. From what it looks like, they even got this idea from, well, you guessed it, the Beatles. Another great thing I have to say that goes for many bands that I like is that you have more than one singer. It helps you. You have John Lennon and Paul McCartney, or you have Fleetwood Mac. You have the Eagles. It's great to have two singers because that makes a difference between the tracks as well. This is what Andersson had to say about ABBA picking up the idea of having multiple lead singers and incorporating it into their own group. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying it. Also, press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to what we were talking about. Number 3. What did the Beatles think about ABBA? It looks like the Beatles have nothing but nice things to say about the group, which is pretty much their Swedish counterpart. The former member of the Beatles, Paul McCartney, said they deserve all the success they have had, and a lot more. Besides, it's far more difficult for a foreign group to make it big in the States. But I'm quite confident in ABBA being successful, so it's quite clear that he holds the group in very high regard. Apart from that, McCartney even recorded a video of himself, congratulating members of ABBA, Benny Andersson and Bjorn Ulvaeus, which was screened at a private party in Stockholm in 2016, in which the 50th anniversary of the group was being celebrated. But the thing is, ABBA and the Beatles go way back. In 1982, Paul met Annie Fried at Air Studios while she was making some music for her solo album. This particular meeting was made part of the TV documentary, which was based on Frida's album. The late lead guitarist of the Beatles, George Harrison, also talked about ABBA, supporting them in an interview. He talked specifically about Agnetha, who, according to him, did the right thing by stepping away from the spotlight for her own sake. Number 2. John Lennon on ABBA. Perhaps the most well-known member of the Beatles, John Lennon, was also a fan of ABBA's work. It was pretty expected considering how ABBA was climbing up the ranks of the music industry, all the while the Beatles were also in their prime time. In one instance, Lennon stated that one of ABBA's hit songs, SOS, apart from the millions of other people, was also one of his own personal favorite songs. How cool is that? Number 1. So what has ABBA been up to? ABBA has recently come out of their 40-year-long dormancy and are in the attempts of innovating the world through their series of virtual concerts called Voyage, which are being held at an arena custom-made for ABBA in London. The reason the Swedish group picked London to be the location of their revival was explained by the show's producer, Svanna Gisla, who told that ABBA wanted to show their support for the UK post-Brexit. They want to instill hope in the population through their flamboyant musical performances, which are just as good or even better than how they used to be decades ago. The concept of ABBA Voyage was praised by a number of people, including NME's Andrew Trindle, who gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Aging rockers and poppers are bound to imitate the idea, but it'll be a struggle to come close to the experience of ABBA Voyage. We, for one, welcome our new Avatar overlords, if only for giving these songs back to us in a totally new and joyful way, Trindle wrote on his social media handles. This brings us to the end of our video. Here was a deep dive into all the things one great band learned from another, in this case, ABBA and the Beatles.